All right, well, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. This is, I think this is the fifth year that I've attended what's now the summit. And it's amazing to see the growth. I mean, just in the number of people, the topics. Having CIOs here, to speak to the subject matter is just excellent. On my title, right, so I'm looking at this. This could be why your R&D strategy needs a data strategy, why your sustainability strategy, why your quality strategy, right? So, and I think really the theme, which is also great to see, is just the importance of data and how it's just impacting how we do business, right, and how we're going to be successful. So just a little bit about me. So I've been in my current role with Gartner for just over 5 years. Prior to that, I've got over 25 years in basically R&D, packaging R&D, product development. And it's interesting when I started to cover this space in my role, and I cover, the spec management, spec data management. I never realized there was a different way to deal with our spec information, So I've almost 30 years, and it's all the stories that you've heard so far. Legacy systems, outdated systems, just difficulty, right? But that's all I knew. So all the companies I worked at, it was like, I just thought that's the way you did it. And then I start to research the space, and I'm like, oh, there's actually a different way to go about it, So that's been something that I've covered for the past 5 years. So if you're not familiar with Gartner, Gartner is the world's largest research and advisory company. It started in the 70s. So the founder, basically thought that folks on Wall Street probably needed help navigating basically IT, right? Mainframes, hard drives, computers, software. And that's where the company started. And that's really where we have the biggest bulk of our research and our clients. But Gartner over the years has also gone into different areas. So I work in supply chain, so I cover the packaging space within supply chain, but we also have advisory for HR, finance, procurement, pretty much you name it now. And Gartner covers it. So really my job is to do research, find different solutions. We, as it says here, our clients, we basically just advise them how to do their jobs better, right? So that's, basically the job that I have, and I cover packaging. So why the focus on data strategy? I mean, there's really the common theme here, right? And I'm actually really happy to see that because it kind of validates some of my research and some of my thoughts as I bring it forward. But what I see is that, really we need to capture data at that granular level, right? And we've talked a lot about it. It's a big gap. But that information is the information that's going to flow up where we look at data from an enterprise level perspective, right? So when we need to make decisions, if it's, in supply chain, a lot of discussions around risk management, right? Think about, microchip shortage. I remember, during COVID, I had clients that couldn't ship their products to their customers because they couldn't buy the corrugate box, of all things, right? We kind of forgot about those things, right? Pallet shortages, anybody remember that? Like all these different things, right? But you need the information at that granular level to build it up to that enterprise so we have visibility and we can drive our decision making. And with that, our approach to data will drive results. And I think, maybe that hasn't been spoken a lot about so far, but, at the end of the day, it's all about having a sustainable business from the profit standpoint, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what our CEOs need. That's what they're measured on. We got to make money to drive the business, right? We want to be green and we want to do a lot of other things, but at the end of the day, we've got to be successful, right? Or it all kind of falls apart. And we do see that there's a widening gap in this digital maturity. So this is some research, essentially looking at different sectors, but also a relative score about data capability. And quite honestly, most of what companies have done around data, it's mostly around consumer data so far, right? So of course, whatever you click something, someone's collecting our data. There's also things about like supply chain visibility, sourcing. What I think is interesting with this, right, you start to see the gap between the leaders and the laggards. The number is the average. So you see that kind of at the lower end. And when it comes to things like product and packaging, especially packaging's kind of been one of these areas that is left behind. I think Matthew mentioned it in his talk yesterday, right? So it's something that's getting more attention. When I talk to clients, I would say that around packaging, product, spec information, the capabilities are at the very, very low end of these blue lines, right? So we're really far behind there, a lot of opportunity to make up. And it is challenging, right? We've talked a bit about the challenges, and you really need to have a strategy, start to build that. You need the technology, right? We've talked a lot about dated legacy technologies. You need the data, right? We need to continuously enrich the data. Some of the presentations from this morning, right? It's a process, it's a journey. You got to get started, but then it's going to be continuous. And then you need that change management, right? You need the adoption and scaling. We need people across our functions to take part, leave the old ways, right? Adopt the technology and solutions and take part in it, right? So, it is a journey, and I think some of the case studies this morning were really excellent in explaining that journey. And we do see, changes shaping digital and data strategy. So we just published earlier this week, so we have the Gartner Future Supply Chain. So we interview, I think it's over 800 supply chain leaders around different areas, and there's a significant part of the research that's around data. And we see that, and this is over the next 3 years, and we see that almost 70% of those surveyed are going to be investing in digitalization. And I think what's important here is they expect supply chains to adapt, right? So they're expecting results, they're expecting changes as a result of these investments. And we also see, things like data growth, right? The amount of data, it's gonna be a challenge, right? We need to collect it, it has to be accurate, we have to utilize it, we have to have the visibility. And we also see that, there's a lot of, aspects about the economics of it, right? Again, we got to drive our businesses to be more competitive, to be more profitable, to be more successful. And you start to see things like using data to automate inventory, optimization, the aspect of predictive analytics, right? So a lot of talk of AI, machine learning. So there's an expectation that that's going to help to fuel business. But of course, as we've talked about, you got to start with the right data, right? Complete data to be able to utilize that. But there, again, there's some challenges that we talked about, right? So within this survey, some of the key digital-related challenges over the next 3 years include managing that data integrity, right? We had a lot of discussion about that this morning. I mean, that's a key thing, right? And there's a recognition that we have improvement to make, right, around that data integrity. Again, with the resources, so having those dedicated teams, again, enable the organization to utilize the technology and the data. And organizations that invest to extract value from the digital assets will thrive, right? So we saw in the earlier chart, the gap, and what we have here is, some of the aspects around collaboration, risk, time to value, and we start to see the gap between, what we have the high performers and the lower performers. And it's about, I think from the survey, about 17% of those surveyed kind of fall in that higher performer, right? So, we tend to think of maybe like the top 10 or 20% of organizations out there that have, gotten ahead of this. But there's a lot of areas around, again, collaboration, risk. I think what's interesting in the risk area is the initiative to design product portfolios, formulate recipes with sustainability in mind, right? So that is an objective. To me, I do see this future where we're using AI, we're using machine learning. I always think back to my R&D days. So when you have that first meeting, you have that project charter, the brand team has the next great idea, the consumer research comes in, and we actually use data in that very first week, that first meeting, to say, well, what is the impact around sustainability? What is the carbon footprint? What is the impact on our life cycle assessment? But to do that instantaneously. Today, we tend to do it after we've launched something, then we go fix it, right? And it's much harder to do that. Or we launch something and we realize it's actually set our sustainability target and backwards, right? We have ground we have to make up now. And organizations are also designing for resource sustainability. So a big aspect of supply chain is supply chain risk, right? This whole thing about resiliency, risk. Again, Matthew mentioned it yesterday, just all the changes, right? So there's global conflict, you have weather patterns, just so many different things going on that impact, and to have that visibility. So again, designing products with material sustainability in mind, it's very difficult to do, right? If anybody tries to do an LCA after you've already launched something, it can be very difficult, right? A lot of it, we have to go get the data. But let's design products with that information. Partnering with suppliers, again, something, in the automotive industry, chip shortage, different ingredients, different materials. Again, you have raw material, supply risks around the sourcing and procurement. So all these elements, if we can start to design for resource sustainability, we're going to be much more successful as we go forward. And we find that organizations that innovate in data management will enable sustainable growth, right? And ultimately, like the CIO panel, right? Bring forward how we're going to benefit, right? How are we going to grow? How are we going to optimize cost? But again, I talk to several hundred Gartner clients a year. I talk to a bunch of vendors. I attend different events. It's all about research. And what I find, and I think it's a common thing we've talked about, but most organizations are in the lower level of the maturity model. And I would say regardless of the industry or the size of the company that I'm talking with, if it, in the artwork management, labeling, spec management, Excel or spreadsheets come up in almost every conversation. And, if I bring it up and there's a room that I'm talking to, you start to see the head nod. I saw it here yesterday with Matthew's presentation. Everybody's like, oh, that's us, that's me, or some, things like that. A lot of nodding. People get it, right? So there's room to grow, and I think having a recognition, having a room full like we have, today, getting the word out, sharing it with our stakeholders is really important. And, and my research has changed over the years. I've presented the last couple of years here at the summit, and, my approach had been more about the individual issues, like the point solutions, right? So data to help you drive your sustainability initiatives, or data to help with legislation, data to help with procurement and cost savings. And I think something like AI really got me to think, you need data for everything, right? It's a thread that's going across everything we do today and pretty much everything we're going to want to do in the future. And when I think about, like this chart, those areas in the light blue, those are kind of core, right? Those are things that we focused on. We figured out how to do them. We may not be the most efficient at doing them, but we figured out how to do them. But now all these other things are coming in. So you have things like packaging taxes. A lot of companies are now starting to do their Scope 3 assessment, right? So it's part of their carbon goals. They're starting to go get that information. It's a lot of work. It's difficult, right? You have, ESG, product safety, PFAS. Like I'm getting a lot of calls for that, right? So we have the PFAS, PFOS. So it's starting to get banned. Where is it? Where does it exist? Do we know if it's in our products and packaging or not? How do we manage that? How do we control it? That's something I never even heard of. PFAS like a year ago. It's something that it was there and nobody really talked about it. And then certainly AI, and we've talked about that, right? And I think there's huge potential and opportunity for AI, I think, to complement our jobs. But again, we're not going to be able to do it without getting that data in first, right? The AI's got to analyze something. So what's it going to be? Hopefully it's good, clean data. I know organizations I talk to that they tend to do like AI more for, I'd say, like supply chain risk. One of the issues is that they don't trust the data. So it'll be like, oh, you're going to run out of this or that, but they have a 50% confidence in that data. So now are you going to go, pull the trigger on like a $20 million investment to shore up supply, and that data was wrong? And then someone's going to turn to you and be like, why did you do that? But if you don't take that action and the data was right, you're the one without, the microchips, and you can't sell your cars, right? So, there is a big gap in building that confidence, right? So that's something that we need to do. And I'm going to conclude the presentation with this topic of composability. This is from some Gartner research. Quite honestly, so in my job, I read a lot, do a lot of research. I read our own research to learn. And I came across, there's a whole series of notes around composability. And you can have composable manufacturing, you can have composable architecture and how you build software. I mean, you can have people, like an operation that's composable, right? You can swap people, different people can do different jobs interchangeably. So that's kind of I'd say that's the concept. But when I came across this, I was like, this really helps to explain what having, say, an advanced, say, spec management solution or artwork solution, labeling solution, this is what we need to go forward, right? And I find that this is really helpful to explain to folks in our organizations who don't well, why do we need a change, right? Or what's wrong with what we have? And I think when you show the capabilities of what's possible, that's when it all starts to, become much more clear. So around, composability, and if you think about some of the things that were discussed earlier today in the case studies, you need to be able to orchestrate data, right? You have all this data, you got to be able to orchestrate it, move it around. If you want to do a sustainability report, or you got to submit your, for a UK plastic tax, right? You got to orchestrate the data. You got to be able to discover it, right? You got to go be able to search it, find it, have confidence in it. Things like modularity and autonomy, you get into like a like item finder, right? Something like that. So, I got to be able to go find a particular material. Where can I use it, right? Where is it in my system? Does it fulfill the needs that we have? So having that capability is what we need in advanced solutions, right? Advanced applications. It's this area of composability. And it's actually coincidence. I like to use this music example. We got the music theme and the music in the event and Music City. But I often explain to clients, because they're like, well, what do you mean I could run a report faster? Or I could update specs, or I could pull information that procurement needs. What do you mean I could do it in minutes versus 2 weeks? They don't get it, right? Because it's just, we haven't done it before. How could that be possible? And I think about music, right? So, we have this example of, a compact disc. So for those of you maybe don't know, a little silver, I wish I had one, So we moved, years ago from analog, LPs, tapes, cassettes, that have you, to a compact disc. So we digitized the music. But you also have something like streaming music services, right? Which is also digitized music. It's music in a digital format. But if I wanted to share some music with everybody in this room, right, via a compact disc, it would probably take literally a month or two, right? So I'm going to fly home on Friday, so I can't even start the process till Friday. I'd have to go find the compact disc. So if you're like me, I save this stuff, but it's in the basement. And if I want to listen to something, instead of going to find it, I just buy it again on Apple, or I listen to it on Spotify or something, right? So I'd have to go find the disc. And then there's a thing where we used to burn CDs, So I actually have a burner somewhere in the house. I'd have to plug it in. But then you go to burn it, right? And so if I had to do 250 of these, and it takes a couple minutes, and then, how do I get it to you? I need your mailing addresses. So now I'm writing out little envelopes, right? And I'm mailing it to you, and then the Postal Service might take, depending where you are, a couple days, maybe longer, right? So literally for me to do that, it would take weeks and weeks, maybe a month or two, right? Because I start it, and then kind of like we're searching for information at work, right? You start it, there's a different emergency, you go do it, you go back to it, where did I leave off? But with the streaming music service, right, I could give you the name of the artist or song, and I've got 33 seconds left. You would be listening to it before I'm done, right? I mean, that's composable. So that streaming music, you can sort it, you can move it, right? It's modular. So that's the power. So I explain that to clients. They're like, oh, I get it. So I could do that with my specs, or I could do that with my artwork, or different things like that, with the right tools. And that's really the power. And I think that's what we got to share. And this area of composability is a way to explain that, I think. So feel free to use that, amongst your teams just to get the word out. So thank you very much.